Hello, people. I've finished another book. This is volume 3 of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. There's 6 volumes, and just because I've got through volume 3 doesn't mean nothing. Volume 3 and volume 2 were 610 pages. I think some of the other ones go up as high as 800 pages, so I'm not really halfway finished. But this volume here does cover the end of the Western Roman Empire. Just a little bit about this book. I bought this set at King Book. They had 2 sets there. One of them was much nicer than this set. This set was like $35. My complaints about this set is the pages are so fucking thin. In my last video, I actually ripped a page, just taking the sticky note out of there. I probably spend 10 minutes in each one of these volumes making sure that I'm not skipping a page, because they're stuck together. I gotta look at the page number to make sure I'm not skipping a page. I think I mentioned this in the first video that I made for volume 1, that Gibbon's Rome is, I compare it to the Bible, because there are many people that claim to have read this and they haven't. When you Google Gibbon's Rome, they give you several quotes from the book, and since I've read volume 1, I know that all of those quotes that Google has are from volume 1. So whoever did the fucking Google page only read 1 volume. This was printed in 1901, and I've run into this before. I ran into a spot in this book where there was like 5 pages that had never been separated. Now, I don't know how they print books, but they had to have printed this in a big solid sheet. The pages were folded, but they had never been separated, and I had to open them up with my finger, much like you'd open up an envelope if you don't have one of those fancy knives to do that. So, that's enough of that. Let's get to my notes. Maximus rebels against Gratian, who was Valentinian's brother. Gratian is killed. It looks like I'm supposed to be reading something here. The youth of the island. Now I gotta fucking find where that starts. Son of a bitch. I can't find it. And I do not remember what that was about. Something about... there it is. The youth of the island crowded to his standard, and he invaded Gaul with a fleet and army which were long afterward remembered as the immigration of a considerable part of the British nation. And I marked that because Britain, I don't know that they've ever invaded anybody. I mean, later on they had the British Empire, yes. But in antiquity, they were just invaded over and over. First by the Romans, the Saxons, the Normans, the Vikings. Pretty much, if you trace your lineage back to England, you're going to find out that you probably have genetics from what Strabo would say is a Germanic nation. Jesus, I just did it. Look at that paper-thin piece. So you know what? I'm just going to leave the whole sticky note in there. And I guess some lessons you have to learn over and over. I got to be careful when I take these fucking sticky notes out of here. The last book ends with Theodosius, and this is also with Theodosius. They call him Theodosius the Great. I didn't see much of in here that that would make him great. He tried to finish Arianism, and Arianism again runs through the whole fucking book. And all Arianism is some people, the non-Arians, feel that Jesus and God and the Holy Ghost are of the same equality, the same validity. The Arians thought, quite logically, I might add, that since God came before Jesus, that he was more important, or he was greater. So Theodosius tried to stamp out Arianism, but he really wasn't able to. I think it would be interesting to find out if anybody still is an Arian. I'm sure that there are. Ambrose, this is, people would think that the end of the Roman Empire was, getting sacked by the Goths, or getting sacked by the Vandals. But there's a guy named Ambrose. He's like a bishop of Rome or something. Theodosius tries to exile Ambrose, and Ambrose just fucking ignores it. And Ambrose, his supporters face down imperial soldiers, and I wrote there that the end of the Roman Empire is nigh, because they lost, he lost face big time. Theodosius is again humbled by Ambrose after the massacre at Thessalonica, something like that. A lot of names in here that, one of the things that makes it hard to read is when you cannot pronounce a name. I will challenge you to read books about China in antiquity, and the names being impossible to pronounce. It actually makes it difficult to remember what you've read. And here I just marked a page where there's a guy named Holy John. In the neighborhood of that city, and on the summit of a lofty mountain, the Holy John had constructed with his own hands a humble cell, in which he had dwelt above 50 years, without opening the door, without seeing the face of a woman, and without tasting any food that had been prepared by fire. So these people would go to Holy John when they wanted him to divine the future. Holy John was a Christian, and I don't know, I just thought it was kind of ironic that the Oracle of Delphi and all the other, the Vestal Virgins, those were all outlawed, and yet they have this guy named Holy John that's doing the same shit. Theodosius dies. His sons Arcadius and Honorius take over, and both of his sons are pretty much unremarkable. Again, this is the age of the holy relics, where, the hunks of the true cross that are buried under altars in all these churches, if you added them all up, they would make an entire forest. And I think the wind just blew my page there, but I was going to read something, a superstitious practice. I'm going to have to skip that, because I'm not looking through there to find that. Gibbon is full of praise for the early Christians, not so much for the Christians of 100 years later. And here I'm supposed to read something. The religion of Constantine. The religion of Constantine achieved, in less than a century, the final conquest of the Roman Empire. But the victors themselves were insensibly subdued by the arts of their vanquished rivals. And that, you run into that over and over. Theodosius dies, his sons take over the east and west. Enter Alaric. And this is where the book gets interesting. I don't know, I really like the Goths and the Gothic armies. They also turned to Christianity. They were pretty much Arians. The Gothic armies ravaged the Greek cities. Pretty much the Goths, Alaric, did what he pleased several times. Another reason why I love reading, that's how this little note begins. Another reason why I love reading, the Stone of Tantalus. Gibbon just uses that to describe something else. And so I got interested and I went and Googled the Stone of Tantalus, and it's a pretty cool part of Greek mythology. Boy, I go a long ways here without another note. But the Gothic king Alaric lays siege to Rome. This is the first or the second time. Let's see if I can find this. In negotiations, the Roman citizens, they threatened to, arm the citizens of Rome and make a sally out and attack the Gothic troops. And Alaric replies, they threaten him with numbers. They say, oh, you're not going to believe how many people come out of here. Alaric replies, the thicker the hay, the easier it is to mow. And then he laughs in the guy's face. This time, Alaric decides not to sack Rome, and they sign a treaty. And in the treaty, and I've read about this before, I always thought it was very cool, part of what the Romans have to pay is 3,000 pounds of pepper. So the Goths obviously were fond of spicing their food with pepper. I use a lot of pepper here. I use a lot more pepper than I do salt. The Western, oh my God, I fucking ripped another page. God damn it, I'm going to have to put this back in. It's incredible how thin these pages are. And I was careful with that one. The Western Roman Empire contracts. They lose Britain, they lose Gaul, they lose Spain. I'll put that back in very carefully. Not only do you have Alaric running around, you have Theodoric, who is the Visigoths. Alaric is pretty much the Ostrogoths. And you also have Genseric and the Vandalic nation. There's just an incredible epic of the Vandals. The Alans kind of hang out with the Vandals. And at this point in the book, the Vandals have gone, from what would have been Prussia. They go all the way through Gaul. They settle in Spain for a while. And then they decide to hop in some boats and take Africa from Rome. And it was a hell of a blow for Rome to lose Africa, because that's where they got their fucking food from. At that time, Africa was, a breadbasket. There's also a thing there called the Fable of the Seven Sleepers. It's some city in Africa that gets besieged and sacked by the Vandals. And apparently these seven young men, go into a cave and fall asleep. And 187 years later, they find them, and they just wake up and they're still alive. It's one of the miraculous things that used to happen that doesn't really seem to happen anymore. And I go a long ways without any notes. We go all the way to the Catalonian fields. I have Attila on that note there. And this is a battle where Theodoric the Visigoth, he's actually killed in the battle. But Theodoric allies himself with a Roman army. They take on Attila and his army. Really, all the major tribes in Europe are involved in this battle, one way or the other. And the Visigothic and the Roman armies defeat Attila. Attila actually prepares to commit suicide. The Hunnic saddles were made of wood, and he piles up a shitload of saddles, instructs his men to light that on fire if, they're about to be overrun. for some reason, for political reasons, really, the Visigoths and the Romans never finish off Attila. They allow him to retreat. Attila is beaten, but he's not down. He comes back and fucks around in Italy for a while, destroys some cities, gets very close to Rome. I've read a lot of different descriptions of what happens when he gets close to Rome. Pope Leo comes out and talks to him, and a lot of authors tend to ascribe Attila, retreating and not sacking Rome to some kind of miraculous thing. Gibbon has cleared that up for me. Gibbon, there was a woman who was actually in Constantinople. She was, her name was Honorius or something like that. She was probably out of her mind a little bit. She sends a ring to Attila. She's nobility. She's Roman nobility. Sends a ring to nobility and a proposition for marriage. And Attila wants this. And so part of the treaty that gets Attila to retreat from Rome, part of that treaty says they're going to let him have Honorius. And he's like, sweet. There's some great parts in this book. It only took me a couple of weeks to read, only because you got Alaric and you got Genseric, and that's very interesting. But then he gets to a point towards the end of the book where he talks about monks. Okay, here I'm supposed to read something. The favorites of heaven were accustomed to cure inveterate diseases with a touch, a word, or a distant message, and to expel the most obstinate demons from the souls or bodies which they possessed. They familiarly accosted or imperiously commanded the lions and serpents of the desert, infused vegetation into a sapless trunk, suspended iron on the surface of the water, passed the Nile on the back of a crocodile, and refreshed themselves in a fiery furnace. These extravagant tales, which display the fiction without the genius of poetry, have seriously affected the reason, the faith, and the morals of the Christian. Their credulity debased and vitiated the faculties of the mind. They corrupted the evidence of history, and superstition gradually extinguished the hostile light of philosophy and science. That's, every mode of religious worship which had been practiced by the saints, every mysterious doctrine which they believed was fortified by the sanction of divine revelation, and all the manly virtues were oppressed by the servile and pusillanimous reign of the monks. If it be possible to measure the interval between the philosophic writings of Cicero and the sacred legend of Theodoret, between the character of Cato and that of Simeon, we may appreciate the memorable revolution which was accomplished in the Roman Empire within a period of 500 years. I can't stress that too much, that, how gullible people were, and that's what led to the Dark Ages was... here I just have a little note about the pages being stuck together. The pages have never been cut. To me, it's amazing that this thing was printed in 1901, and nobody has ever read this book until I have. Gibbon has unraveled two things for me, and one of them was that, the mystery of why Attila didn't sack Rome, and here he's talking about the Saxons, which is also very, very interesting. The Saxons were really 7 very wealthy families that invaded Britain, and here it says 7 independent thrones, the Saxon heptarchy, were founded by the conquerors, and 7 families, one of which has been continued by female succession to our present sovereign, derive the equal and sacred lineage from Woden, the god of war. Okay, so what he's talking about there is the royalty of England. It's not English. They're Saxon. And I Googled it, and it looks like there's been some little interbreeding there, but if you've ever wondered why uh, the fucking royalty of England is actually German, because that's where the Saxons come from. And that's it. I'm already reading another one. I got 2 notes left in here because I ripped fucking pages. I'm already reading another one. I'm reading a book called Julian the Apostate. And no, I couldn't find the good Julian book. I will eventually. I'm going to be broke for like a fucking month here because I had massive repairs done to my truck. So I cannot go out and buy brand new books. If I can't find a book at the used bookstore, I'm not going to buy it. Eventually I will get it because I do find Julian to be a very interesting character. Thank you.